How's it going, everybody, and welcome back again to the channel for another edition of LANDO'S Tiers. That is right, it's your favorite YouTube tiered series in which we go through all 12 teams in the CDL and rank them as accurately as humanly possible. I've done my best, I really have. I've sat here for hours and done my best to make the most accurate, appropriate list that can exist. That rhymed. But no, excited to obviously talk about everything going down leading into Major 3. I felt like our lead into Major 2 was spot on in some ways. You know, we definitely valued certain teams a little higher than they should have. But for the most part, I was pretty happy with how things went. So we'll see how leading into Major 3, how everything looks. We get a lot of roster changes that are going down. We're still in the midst of those. So you'll hear me call certain things confirmed, certain things not. It's just the timing that of which we got this video out in. Also, stay tuned in for LANDO'S lock-ins that is coming very soon as well. As you notice here, according to the list, we've got an array of different categories. And obviously this is in, order of a typical, typical tier list, but we've got them labeled accordingly based off the teams that will sit in either of those tiers. So we'll start things off with no comment. Royal Ravens. What's going on? Why are we not hearing anything about the Royal Ravens? There are leaks, there are rumors, there is intel everywhere, but we're not hearing anything about the London Royal Ravens. I'm frustrated that we are not. I have no idea what's going on with them. It feels like shades of the Paris Legion situation for the past 2 years. So I'm hoping that things turn around with the Royal Ravens. Again, no comment to me. They are far and away considered to be the worst team right now in the league. They're showing no signs of improvement. They've also not made any changes. Sorry, but not sorry. All right, let's move on to I need more. Again, I like these changes. I like that we're seeing moves, but I still need more. There's lots of rumors currently out there for the Mutineers. Certain things confirmed, certain things are not. Currently, what we do know, Dave Patty, Major Maniac, out of there, not coming back, at least in the nearby future. Vehicles going to the bench. Brack is back. Thank God. No idea why that happened in the first place. And then there were some rumors suggesting that Capsule as well as Fellow could be added to this team. As I'm recording this, Fellow is confirmed. Capsule has yet to be. However, he is obviously the front runner, and we will work off of that being the case. I really like the additions that they've made. To be honest, I feel like Capsule is a playmaker. We saw him do that last year on Boston. And in his short little stint that he played with the LA Thieves, I thought he looked solid. Excited to see him be back. I know there's a lot of people who aren't super excited about Fellow because it's not a, super high slayer by any means. But at the same time, it feels like right now for Florida, chemistry, just in general, culture around the team doesn't seem to be super high. I think with big moves being made, you get Fellow in there. He's able to kind of focus this team up, get them on the right page, and also get them on the right page when it comes down to the way that they should play. I feel like this team is going to only get better at Search Destroy. Capsule's amazing at it. Brack was putting up some unbelievable numbers. We know how the rest of the team can play on it as well. So excited to see this team probably get better at Search Destroy. And I think by having these two players, it improves their S&D. It also hopefully refocuses them on where they sit amongst the CDL landscape. So we'll see what happens with the Florida Mutineers. I feel like they do have some playmakers. I think Brack and Capsule can both be those. Havoc obviously has his moments where he pops off as well. The only problem is that, do I think this team got better? I do. Do I think they can consistently, and that's the biggest word, consistently take down the teams above them? I do not. So with that, we will move on to another team that I feel like did need to do more. Also recently had their roster confirmed. Lots of rumors going around. Who is going to be off of this team? Are we going to see both the S and Gs? No, in fact, it is only going to be one. Prolude is out. And they've added 2 Real, who we know played for a short time on Florida last season. There were high hopes for him. Did not look great. I personally was one to say that I think it was a majority of the time based off the situation that he was in. Vegas, still not an amazing spot given how poor the respawn is, but I feel like he can come in and definitely have an impact. I mean, we know it, right? For Vegas Legion, we need more because, again, the respawns are horrible. I mean, they're 4-12 in control, and they are 10-20 in hardpoint. They are by far the worst respawn team in the CDL, but one of the best Search Destroy teams. 15-8. Can 2 Real be enough to change all of that around? I would hesitate to say yes, but maybe he provides a bit more of a consistency when it comes down to hardpoints into the controls. You do wonder a few different things how many close hard points that Vegas Legion have lost. If you're adding somebody in that can be a little bit more consistent than Proloot, at least in terms of respawn, well, maybe you're winning some of those close hard points from time to time. We will see. I'm eager to see how Vegas Legion looks to handle major number 3. High hopes for them as always. I know there was a lot of players that they potentially were working on adding, to Real. There were some rumors on Yuli, Kremp, personally a big Kremp fan. So I know there were some people talking about, was or is Too Real the right player to add? We will see. But again, I need more. Let's move on now to frustrating. Yes, this is just me getting ticked off. I feel like in our first 3 tiers, we're starting things off with probably the most frustrating team right now in the CDL, and that is the Seattle Surge. Many were flabbergasted at how the Seattle Surge nosedived into Major 2 after finishing 2nd place at the Raleigh Major. I will go ahead and say it. I'm not surprised. I'm really not. Like, did we all forget what Seattle Surge did last season? Like, regardless of all of the conversations, all of the things that have been said on the stream, all of the Pred to OpTic situation, things of that nature, let's just throw that to the side before we get into this and say Seattle Surge last season. I'm just going to read you off the placements quickly. Top 12 at Major 1, top 6 at Major 2. They should have placed higher. Mac literally threw up in a series versus the Atlanta FaZe. They probably at least finished top 3 at that tournament if he doesn't get sick. Regardless, top 6. Then they go into the Pro-Am where they finished top 16. They lost to amateur teams. They lost to Fire. They lost to Silly. They were not in a good spot. Then a few weeks later, they roll into Major 3. They win the entire thing. And you're thinking, okay, great. Then they rolled into Champs. Nope. Major 4 happened. And where'd they finish? Top 12. Moving to Champs, finished 3rd. Then everyone, it feels like everybody forgets that Seattle Surge was so up and down last season. They literally went from losing to amateur teams to winning a tournament, to top 12, to finishing 3rd at Champs. They come into this season, they finished 2nd. I was not buying it. Major 2, they finished top 12, and we know the reason for why they are finishing top 12. It is because they cannot win Search and Destroys. There's no doubt, right? They've lost their last 10 S&Ds. We're moving into Major 3, and they've yet to win an online Search Destroy. I don't know how that is possible, but it is. There's been no rumors made out from the Seattle Surge, which I think this is at least for me, this could potentially and most likely will be the last qualifier, the last major where we see the Seattle Surge team be intact. I have my speculation. I have my personal expectations. I think that Pred will be on OpTic Texas before this season ends. That is not intel. That is just me being honest and with the way that I think things will go. I think that Seattle Surge, they're on their official last leg. If they do not place well, I worry for them. And I think that if they do place poorly, we see a big change, whether that's Pred going to another team if Seattle decides that this run is over, or if it's them making a, huge bite at maybe somebody who could be a free agent or somebody who could be bought out, etc. I think there is something to be said for the Pred to OpTic Texas things. I think that obviously has an impact on the team. I don't think it's as severe as everyone thinks. I feel like a lot of people are like, Seattle Surge, oh my God, they just finished top 12. I mean, they must hate Pred. I don't think it's like that. I think there is something to be said about Pred's comments about being LeBron when it came down to the Cavs. I'll throw that to the side. Things are definitely not great, but I don't think they're horrific when it comes down to like this team's mentality. But when you cannot rely on Search Destroy, I mean, I feel it as a caster, and I'm not even playing. Just the negativity moving into every Search Destroy for Seattle. I hope they can get better, but I'm not putting them higher than this. There's no way that you can, considering how the direction of them looks right now. Let's move on to another team that's currently very frustrating, and that is the LA Guerrillas. Now, I'll be honest. I think a lot of this is particular because of how excited that I was for LAG to make this move. A lot of people were like, you know what? This is not great. We're bringing in 3 players. Assault. I mean, we've seen Exceed play like, a few years ago. He wasn't amazing. Who's Joe Deceives? Like, this guy was literally ranked last season. I was pretty excited about him. And what they ended up doing is they finished 2 and 3 in the qualifiers. You could say, okay, that's pretty average. However, they beat the LA Thieves and they beat the Minnesota ROKKR in 2 of their wins, or rather all 2 of their wins were versus those teams. And then their losses, one was a game 5 loss to Florida that they should have won. Another one was a loss to Atlanta FaZe in a game 5 round 11, that of which, ladies and gentlemen, They were up 2-0. They get reverse sweeped in a game 5, round 11. And in that game 5, I believe they were up 4-0. And then at another point, we're up 5-3. And they give it up. So we're talking about how this team very well could have and very well should have finished 4-1. And on top of it all, if you look at the Major 2 results, they would have beaten Atlanta, who finished first, the Thieves, who finished second, and the Minnesota ROKKR, who finished third. LA Guerrillas, you are frustrating because you should have placed better at the Major. Obviously, like I said, the qualifier record, it's a new team. I was thinking, you know what? Coming into the Major, they're surely going to play better. How do they play on LAN? They lose to Toronto again in back-to-back series from online to LAN. They beat Vegas, and then they get 3-0 bopped by Boston. I hate to say it, but I do worry about all the hype and the excitement around the Guerrillas was slightly too high. Will they have their moments? I think so, but I do feel like the C category, the frustrating category, is the exact spot to put them right now. We'll see if they can deliver. We'll see if they can improve. But again, you know, they have that upset potential, but is that magic gone? Time will tell. Let's move on to oddly similar. So this is an interesting category for one of two reasons. Well, not even one of two reasons. It's because of the two teams that I'm talking about who exist in this category. You will find out who these two teams are as I read this off to you. So it's kind of weird, almost uncanny that these two teams have a lot of similarities between themselves. Both teams made a roster change heading into Major 3. Both teams made a roster change for an AR player who was previously in Challengers. Both teams just had a player retire in the exact same Major. Both teams played each other and that player who retired's last series. Both teams have a very fast SMG duo. And kind of stretching there. Both teams currently sit next to each other in the standings at number 6 and number 7. Both teams are green. Yeah, we're stretching here a lot. And one of these teams, I believe, will be in the A tier after Major 3. We're talking OpTic Texas. We're talking Boston Breach. We'll start things off with OpTic Texas. The without question, the most interesting team, I think, right now, post Major 2, leading into Major 3, given all of the craziness that happened with them really so far throughout this year. I mean, even starting from the offseason leading into MW2, it's been wild for these guys. And we just have another chapter in what has been a crazy saga for them. They decide to go ahead and move away from Illy, which I was personally surprised about. I imagine the comms, or rather the internal stuff, wasn't amazing. Just given all of the craziness that you have to deal with just throughout Major 2 specifically. I mean, we saw retirement. We saw players added. We saw players come back. We saw, drama all over the timeline. We saw a coach who's no longer coaching this team. That ends up going through. And then they play a few matches online. They instantly go into LAN. And if you were to tell me that a team was going to go through all of that, finish top 4, I would be like, okay, like that sounds like a win. Like that to me sounds like a win. And on top of it all, everybody, accurately so, has been so quick to point out, you know what? There was a few moments that if they just make the right play rather than an obvious mistake, they go higher than top 4. Like we're talking about that LA Thieves match. We're talking about players rotating at 50 seconds. We're talking about players being over aggressive on fortress controls on defense. Different things like that, as we can all pinpoint them right now. They fix those mistakes, a very good chance of beating the Thieves, guaranteed top 3. You're facing off against Minnesota. Maybe you go to the finals. Maybe you win the whole thing. Who knows? And then we see a roster change. And so it was definitely surprising. As I've heard more and more information, I've started to understand the whole reasoning behind why that move was made. Obviously, if things are not going great internally, sometimes you just know when to pull the cord. And obviously they decided to do that. I've talked about this change a little bit at length. There's a lot of layers to it. And I do think that some people didn't understand exactly, what my point was when I discussed that I was a little worried about this move being made. What I will say in summary is that I feel like for OpTic Texas, did they make a good move? Yeah, I feel like they made a solid move, right? I mean, obviously Illy and OpTic Texas, it just feels like that relationship is over. That foundation was horrible coming into this season, given the fact that the guy was dropped, the guy was picked back up, yada, yada, yada. So it was already shaky. So does it make sense, right, to go for somebody else in his place? Absolutely. And I feel like it's actually a good move as well, because Ghosty is a very talented player. We'll talk about him more in just a moment. So I wasn't mad about the move. My only thing was that I just feel like it was actually out of order. In terms of, like I said, I think that OpTic Texas will make another roster change before this season concludes. I'm just being honest. I think that it will happen. I've already talked about who I think it will be for throughout this video. So my biggest thing was essentially that I just feel like they went out of order with it. So is it fine to add a rookie player in? Yes, but I feel like the highest priority for the team was to reinforce what you're really, really losing with Illy, because we saw Dashy and Shotzzy throughout this past major really step it up in the comms because maybe of that issue going on with Illy. Throughout listenings and stuff, I've went back and listened to those, and it does feel like they are really the callers, essentially. I feel like that has hindered a bit of Shotzi's gameplay. I think for him, you just let him go, let him make plays. He needs to calm and whatnot. But I think that the IGL role, it's a difficult one to discuss because a lot of people don't think that you need a dedicated player to do it. And I don't necessarily think so either. But you do need a system of which the communication, the IGL doesn't have to be a specific player, but if it's not going to be a specific player, it needs to be blanketed across the other 4 or the other 3, whatever it may be. And I think by losing players like Scump, by losing players like Illy, who I know some people are saying, they weren't actually the IGL. They were the leaders of the team. Like, for sure. Illy was the leader of the team all last season. Like, that was his thing. He was the guy to do the vetoes. The team constantly talked about how they felt Illy, despite, being a younger player, was their guy, right? We asked all kinds of questions. Is Illy the right player to be almost like the captain-like player in the comms, et cetera, et cetera? And it feels like everybody's just like, no, that wasn't the case. And it's like, yes, it previously was. So it does worry you a little bit, right? From that perspective, a new team, it just feels like, again, the foundation is constantly being shaken up right now. Shotzi's literally been the only player who's going to be playing in every single match, right? Dashy has missed his games. Who comes in at the start of Major 2? Then we have Ghosty now coming in at the start of Major 3. Lots of changes, right? Lots of changes going on with OpTic Texas. But I am excited to see Ghosty make his debut for OpTic. I've heard a lot of people discuss. I know Parasite has been one to really talk highly about him. A vocal guy. Seems he's like a human radar in Hardpoint. He just knows the spawns incredibly well. He's also a sniper in Search Destroy, which will be great because he'll kind of instantly take that role potentially from Illy. Could see some variance between him and Dashy in those roles. But again, if you are OpTic Texas, I think that you are looking at the top dogs. You're looking at the Atlanta FaZes, the LA Thieves, who have these systems. Great, slaying talent. There's no doubt. But the highest priority, the reason what makes them so strong, is the system. And I feel like right now for OpTic Texas, that system is changing a lot. And so by adding in a rookie player, that doesn't necessarily instantly improve all of it. I think that there are elements where he's going to come in and really help this team a lot, not just from a slang POV, but you almost find that system by being with each other for a long period. And this is a very new team, right? This is a very new roster. I know players have played with each other previously, but tendencies, things of that nature are still being worked out. So, does it sound like the move was needed? Yes. Do I think that OpTic Texas gets better? I do. However, I hope that very important aspect of the system, which oftentimes isn't fully addressed, I hope that it does at least over time. OpTic Texas does have a very tough schedule. They've got LAG, Toronto, Minnesota, New York, and Atlanta. A lot of pressure as well on Ghosty. I mean, what an opportunity it is for this guy. OpTic rarely, if ever, picks up guys with zero professional experience. They've now got him. He'll be playing, like I said, some major matchups. A lot of pressure moving into Major 3 as that will be in front of OpTic Texas's crowd. So they definitely want to have a high seed. They definitely want to have a winning record when it comes into all 5 of these matches. And a lot of pressure on Dashy and Shotzi's shoulders for sure. When it comes down to this move being made, as it's a big one. It's a big one for sure. We'll see what happens with Illy, but let's move on to another oddly similar. We sat there for a while. We're talking about the Boston Breach, and I'll be honest, these two can kind of interchange. It's not as if I think that Boston, is far and away better than OpTic Texas. I don't necessarily think that OpTic Texas is far and away better than Boston right now. I don't really know where they sit when it comes down to these moves. I think that they are very much, oddly similar when it comes down to how I feel about where they sit moving into Major 3. But we know for Breach, right? Methods, retirement, Beans gets added in. Very excited to see what Beans can do. I'm somebody who has waited. I thought that at some point we would definitely see him be added to the Boston starting lineup, but you know, a chow heavy, faster paced, hype AR player. What more could you want than somebody like that? There's been a few people who've talked about, you know, Beans, his involvement with Boston. There could be some negatives. You know, is he going to be somebody who can play around the objective? Because previously he has not. You've got Awakening, who's also a very gifted, you know, chow heavy AR player as well. But I think ultimately for Beans, that's just one worry. And that's just like one concern. I feel like you have so many other positives when it comes down to him. You add another Slayer. He's a great search destroy mind, can also run that sniper, so Vivid no longer has to. And maybe gives them some confidence when it comes down to those game fives. I mean, they are 0-6 in game fives right now. The lack of ice. What do you need when it comes down to lacking confidence? You need a confident player. Beans is that guy. Another, you know, interesting stat was talking about damage. Typically, like when you look at hardpoint, like damage per 10 minutes or damage per life, whatever it is, that is where you really see your AR Slayers. And right now, if you do include the small sample size that of which Beans played in Awakening's role at Major 1 when Big Wake was sick, in terms of where the AR Slayers sits when it comes down to damage per life, Celium's number 1, Sib's number 2, Skies is number 3, Awakening is number 4, and in the small sample size that we saw Beans play, he would technically sit at number 6, in which those were also not favorable games for them. They didn't win either of those matchups. So I think that Beans numbers get better. I think Awakenings do too. And if both of those guys are playing well, you could have, without question, one of the best slaying AR duos in the entirety of the game, like alongside Thieves, Ultra, New York, maybe OpTic as well. So eager to see how Boston plays. They also think they have a pretty good schedule. You start off versus Toronto, then you've got London, LAG, and Florida to kind of figure things out, and then you face off against Thieves. A very good chance that Boston could finally get over the hump of being good, but not great. And I think this is their chance to potentially do so. Let's move on to our next tier. Ceiling reached? Question marks. These are 3 teams that it feels like we just don't know if the best is yet to come or if it has already passed us by. Minnesota, I'm looking at you. Top 3 finish at Major 2. They beat the LANDO'S first time placing outside of the top 8 since Cold War champs. Bance was inhuman. His respawn numbers were out of this world. He was the number 5 overall KD. He was the number 5 hardpoint KD. He was the number 6 control KD. And in all of those stats, he was second amongst SMGs, which is absolutely wild. And so it feels like for Minnesota, you're almost like, okay, is this what we can come to expect? Or again, do we just see the best version possible of what this team can do? Because I mean, the SMGs were absolutely phenomenal for Minnesota ROKKR. It was Bance in the respawns. At times it was Afro. Afro was especially putting up great numbers in search and destroy. He had, I think, like the number 1 or number 2 KD in search destroy at the Major 2 tournament, while the rest of his teammates were all 24, 25, and 33. So obviously Afro was doing his thing when it came down to that. But there are still your doubts for Minnesota ROKKR, right? You just saw an incredible performance. Can Bance keep that up? At the same time, like I said, you have your worries. Like, what if teams just don't play you on LSC low control anymore? How do you adapt to the other 2 maps? Cammy still does not look comfortable at all. On occasion, he'll have a good search destroy, but it just does not feel like he's in a great mindset there. And then for Minnesota, oftentimes we're like, okay, great. They're good in search destroy. Not right now. Minnesota is not a very, very good search destroy team. Control is their mode. And oftentimes we're talking about their hard points. So do I think that this could be Minnesota's highest placement this season? Yeah, I absolutely do. I think this could very much be the highest that we have Minnesota on the tier list this year. You are looking at how do things shift? Like, can Bance keep up his level of play? Can Minnesota win hard points? Can Afro keep up this level of talent? Will Minnesota start to figure out the search destroy woes? Can Cammy arrive so that takes the pressure off of Bance a little bit? Lots of moving pieces right now for Minnesota. Let us move on now to the Toronto Ultra. Yes. Has Toronto reached their ceiling? And this is another team that I really like. And I feel like my excitement for this team has hurt me quite a bit because I have wanted to put Toronto so often in the S tier when I feel like they deserved it. And now it's kind of led me to a bit of frustration, right? I mean, you talk about Major One, they have some good moments. It's still a new team. They lose to Atlanta. Then they come back. They beat the Thieves. They get knocked out by the team who would eventually win the entire tournament in New York. You will take that. Then they go into Major 2. Finish top 6. Worst placement. Well, who did they play? They beat LAG. Then they get smacked around by Atlanta. And then they get smacked around by the Thieves. Those 6 maps that they lose were not close. And so it leaves you to wonder, they're one of the more interesting teams in Major 3. It feels like we had nothing but positives to say about them. And then as we leave Major 2, they've lost their last 6 maps, and they weren't close versus 2 of the top teams in the game. So you wonder for Toronto, is this where they're going to stay? Because it doesn't feel like in those 2 matches, they really had anything. They didn't really have anything going for them. So it does make you wonder, not have we seen the best of Toronto, but is this just where Toronto's going to be this entire year? Right? Are they just going to be a team that hovers around the top 4? Maybe they'll get a 3rd place finish, but they just won't be able to contend with whoever is the hot dog or the top dog at that moment. Hot dog? I don't know what that is. But will they actually be able to see a championship? Will they be able to be in a final? Can they win a final with this team? And it feels like after that tournament, it makes you wonder if this is just going to be Toronto of this season. Let us move on to the next team. It was very difficult to figure out, by the way. Out of these 5, specifically these 3 in ceiling reached, who was going to sit just underneath our 2 top dogs, not our hot dogs, even though I would love one. And that is the New York Subliners. I'm going to put them in this spot. It's difficult. Like I said, I feel like I could have put any of these 3 here, maybe specifically Toronto, New York. You can make a case for a few teams below them. But I am going to give the edge to the Subliners to technically lead this category, even though it's really not anything wild. But our Major 1 winners, Major 2 did not treat them kindly, right? They go out top 8. They arrived late due to weather conditions. They were the last team to scrimmage. You could say, that really shouldn't play that much of a factor, but it absolutely does. Like, those guys spent 24 hours in the airport just to barely arrive in time for the event. I was in the player area where, with all the team scrimmage and stuff. And it was like, wait, where's New York? And it was like, oh, they're not here yet. Like, they haven't even got here yet. So, obviously the top 8 isn't pretty. They lose a game 5 round 11 to Minnesota. I mean, they're 1 round away where everything could be different if they win that series. They stay in winner's bracket, etc. They go on to beat London though. And then they lose one of the closest 3-0s that we've seen in recent memory to the LA Thieves. So we're looking at that. We're saying, okay, cool. They get knocked out 3-0 by the LA Thieves. Not looking good. However, you do compare, you look at it in Hardpoint, New York were up 191 to 119. You should win that on a hotel. They lose the Search Destroy in round 10. They go out round 5 in the Control. So, it just feels like for New York, it was just a weird major. And I'm not making a case that, they just had bad luck in Major 2, or whatever it is. I'm not really thinking that. It just does feel like in that Major 2 event that they obviously were not in great spirits coming in. They lose a very close 3-0 versus LA Thieves, which I feel like could have gone differently. Again, they win 1 round, versus Minnesota ROKKR. We're talking about them probably in a much different light. They also had a really weird series, whether there were weather delays, and that online matchup versus the Atlanta FaZe, where that went to a game 5. So I don't know. I would say just my biggest concern for the Subliners is just strictly the Search Destroy. They ultimately finished 0-4 in Boston. They're currently 3-7 overall in Major 2. That was my doubt about them, was that if they're not winning Search Destroys, can they actually... Is that going to be their weakness? And it definitely appeared to be the case in Major 2. We'll see if they can turn it around. But the question is definitely out there. Some people are quickly going to the level of, were they a 1-event wonder? Can New York make it back to a final? Can they win another tournament? I will leave them in the 3rd spot for right now with some hesitation, but also with some excitement to see if they can get back on top. Let us move into 2-horse race. Because as I said, ladies and gentlemen, there is a big gap, at least in my mind right now, between 1, 2, and then the rest of the field. You guys know who are going to be the last 2 teams, and understandably so. We're starting things off in the 2-horse race with the LA Thieves. They lost a game 5 versus OpTic to kick off the Major 2 tournament, and from there, they go on a historic, but also at the same time, Common theme, common crazy elimination bracket run. Slasher, who has previously been king of doing this, or whoever it has been, but the Thieves just in general, it feels like they're part of like 3 or 4, some of the best elimination bracket runs that we've seen in Call of Duty history. They go 15-1 in overall map count, which is absurd, by the way. Like, we're talking about how the CDL Call of Duty is at its most highest level that we've ever seen. And this team faced off against Florida, New York, Toronto, OpTic, and Minnesota, and went 15-1 versus all of them. That is crazy. And when people started to doubt them, when they thought Minnesota, they're probably going to have their number, Minnesota's hot right now, they'll probably beat them en route to making it into, the Major 2 final or whatever. No, it was not at all the case. 250 to 168, the hard point, round 10 in the S&D, and the 3-1 in the control. A well-controlled series from the LA Thieves, even versus the stiff competition up until Atlanta FaZe. But this is a huge moment for the LA Thieves. I mean, when it comes down to mentality-wise, to me, I was thinking coming into this tournament, you know what? If LA Thieves don't play well, if they finish outside of like the top 4, top 6, this could be their last event together. And the fact that they're able to pull off a run like that, finish second, it felt like Vanguard Thieves again. And maybe LAT has already, after a slower start to the season, figured things out faster than they did in Vanguard. The S&D was tightened up. The control was elite. And Hardpoint, they went 8-2. And in this game, that is not easy. That is not easy to go 8-2 at a major tournament, considering how crazy Hardpoint is right now. So impressed, but also at the same time, I thought that we would see a spike from the LA Thieves. I just didn't know it was going to be that good. 15-1 is crazy, crazy stuff. Let us move on to our top team, the current leaders of the 2-horse race. And I do feel like there is a decent gap between number 1 and number 2 as well, on top of the fact that I feel like the top 2 in the tier list are far and away ahead of the rest of the pack right now, and that is the Atlanta FaZe. What a run. That was incredibly impressive by far, and I mean far, the best search destroy team in the game. They go 7-0 at Major 2 on land this season. On land this season, Atlanta FaZe in Search Destroy is 14-1. 14-1. That is otherworldly. Their Search Destroy KDs are absurd. Slashers at a 0.99. But Abizi 1.36. His first bloods are out of this world. Celium's at a 1.24 KD. Simp is at a 1.13 KD. Just nothing but kind things, obviously, to say about the Atlanta FaZe. Given the fact that they do face off against Boston to kick off the tournament, they control things versus Toronto. They keep a steady head versus the Minnesota ROKKR. Obviously, have a close series there, but they handle business versus the LA Thieves. They don't win a single hard point in that final, but they get the job done in the 2-3-5-6, which is just the Neslo plus, I guess. I don't know. But it's just funny because when you have a tournament like that where a team, has one close series for the most part, and from there it's pretty well controlled. It's very easy to just be like, oh yeah, like we do Atlanta FaZe is here. Like, it's almost like, oh yeah, of course Atlanta FaZe, we're going to win a tournament. We're already forgetting, by the way, that Atlanta FaZe last season could not get out of second place finishes, right? And now it's like, oh yeah, it's over. Just like that. Snap of a finger. Thanos. He's here and he's totally turned the tide. Impressive stuff from Atlanta FaZe. Again, you do just have a few doubts. You hope that they could kind of tighten up the respawns as time goes on. The hard points are by no means, guaranteed every time. But in control, they looked fantastic for the most part. Search Destroy, as we said, though, is just their backbone. And I don't know what it is. Lately, it just feels like S&Ds are the way to win series. I mean, we've seen a lot of 2-3-5s. If you can be a dominant Search Destroy team, but also be above average in the hard points, that feels like the key to success right now. And Atlanta FaZe is top of the league for that reason. So yeah, nothing really more to say about Atlanta FaZe. Nothing really more to say when it comes down to our tier list. I think this is pretty much as accurate as I could possibly be with it. Could you have a few adjustments made? Sure. But right now, very excited about how things are going to look moving into major number 3. Like I said, a lot of roster changes. Some things still yet to be confirmed, but for the most part, it looks like we are pretty good to go when it comes down to our major 3 rosters. Let me know in the comments what your guys' thoughts are about my tier list. Did I nail it, or did I just screw it up totally? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Let me know what adjustments you think should be made. And I don't know, who you think is going to win major 3? I'll go and toss that out right now. I'll go and toss it out early. That way we can visit those comments again and see who is right. We got a lot of smart people in the comments. But guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. Greatly appreciated. I will see you for LANDO'S lock-ins in a day or so. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Eager to get back into that series as well. But thank you guys for checking out this video. I'll see you back here technically next major when we go over our tier list again. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys back here on the channel very soon.